There is a street in St. Paul, Minnesota, where you can pedal for miles beneath a canopy of trees and pass a century of American ambition frozen in stone. This is Summit Avenue, and by the measure of the historians who study it, no other street in the country preserves the age of Victorian mansions quite so completely. Today we are riding it end to end on an e-bike, rolling quietly past the homes of railroad kings, a great cathedral, and the house where a famous novel was finished. The wheels are already turning, so settle in and let the avenue unfold. Every mansion here has a story, and we are going to ride straight through the middle of them. Summit Avenue runs across the high ground of St. Paul for about 4.5 miles. It begins near the eastern bluff, close to downtown and the great domed cathedral, and it runs west in a nearly straight line until it reaches the Mississippi River, at the edge where St. Paul meets Minneapolis. That single ridge gave the street its name, because it follows the summit of the bluff above the river valley. For a rider, it is a gift. A long, continuous corridor with grand houses on both sides the entire way. We are starting at the eastern end and heading toward the river. The first thing you notice from the saddle is how the street feels less like a city block and more like a park you can ride through. The homes sit back behind lawns and low stone walls, and the trees arch overhead until the light comes down in soft moving patches. On an e-bike, the long grade barely registers, so you are free to look up and around instead of down at the pedals. Cars move slowly here, respectful of a street that has been beautiful for well over a century. It is the kind of place that rewards a rider who is not in a hurry. Summit Avenue is often called the best preserved example of the Victorian monumental residential boulevard in America. That phrase comes from the historian Ernest Sanding, who spent years studying the street and its houses. What makes it remarkable is not that it was the grandest such boulevard when it was built, but that it survived so nearly whole while others were torn down or broken up. More than 370 mansions and residences still stand along its length, representing a dozen different architectural styles. Riding it is like moving through a museum that was never taken apart. As we pedal on, the houses grow larger and more ornate, and you begin to feel the wealth that built this place. These were the homes of the people who made fortunes when St. Paul was a young and booming city on the frontier of a growing nation. Timber, milling, banking, and above all the railroads poured money into these blocks. Each family seemed to want a house grander than the last, and the results lined both sides of the street. From a moving bike, the facades slide past like pages in an illustrated book. The story of Summit Avenue begins in 1855, when a man named Edward Duffield Neal built the very first house up here on what people then simply called the Bluff. In those early years, this high ground was mostly open, a windswept ridge with a long view over the river and the town below. It took decades before the street filled in, and the great wave of building did not truly begin until the 1880s. When it came, that wave transformed the empty ridge into the single most fashionable address in the state. We are riding over ground that was once bare prairie sky. Feel how the land falls away on the sides as we ride the crest of the ridge. This is why the earliest settlers were drawn here, for the view and the clean air above the crowded river flats. The e-bike carries us along the spine of the bluff without effort, the same route the horse carriages once took. On a clear day, you can sense the whole valley opening beyond the rooftops. It is easy to understand why anyone with money wanted to live exactly here. By the end of the 19th century, Summit Avenue had become the address for St. Paul's elite. Their fortunes came mostly from the young city's role as a center of resource extraction and transportation, the timber and grain and rail that flowed through the region. Inside these houses were parlors of carved wood, painted ceilings, and imported furnishings meant to announce a family's arrival. Servants moved through back stairs and side entrances, while the family entertained in grand front rooms. The street was a stage and the houses were built to be seen. We are the audience now, rolling slowly by. Ahead of us, the trees part and a vast dome rises against the sky. This is the eastern anchor of the whole avenue, and you cannot ride Summit without feeling its pull. The road bends gently, and the great church grows larger with every turn of the wheels. For generations, this was the sight that greeted anyone arriving at the head of the street. Let us slow down and take it in properly. The Cathedral of St. Paul stands on the highest point overlooking downtown, at the very head of the avenue. It is the fourth cathedral to carry the name in this city, and it was the dream of Archbishop John Ireland, who wanted a permanent mother church for Minnesota. Its most famous feature is the enormous dome, about 120 feet wide, framed in curved steel and clad in copper. From the base of the building to the top of its lantern, the cathedral rises some 306 feet into the sky. It is a landmark you can see from far across the city, and here it marks the beginning of our ride. The man who designed it was Emmanuel Masqueray, a French architect trained at the celebrated École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. He was chosen in 1905, and construction began the following year on the great Beaux-Arts building inspired by the churches of France. The cathedral opened its doors in 1915, though its interior was still bare and undecorated. Masqueray died suddenly 2 years later, before he could finish the inside, so others carried his vision forward for decades. What we see today is the work of many hands following one Frenchman's grand design. With the cathedral behind us, we push off and the true mansion district begins. The houses here are among the oldest and grandest on the entire avenue, built when the money was newest and the ambition highest. The e-bike hums along the smooth pavement as stone porches and iron fences drift past on either side. This eastern stretch is where the railroad barons chose to build, wanting to be near the church and the heart of the city. One house in particular is about to come up on our right. Here it is, the James J. Hill House, a mountain of red sandstone in the heavy Romanesque style. When it was completed in 1891, it was the largest and most expensive home in all of Minnesota. It holds some 36,000 square feet of living space behind those thick stone walls, with room for a family, an army of servants, and a great pipe organ. In its day, people simply called it the Showcase of St. Paul. Today it survives as a museum kept by the Minnesota Historical Society, and we are riding past its front door. The man who built it was James J. Hill, and he earned a nickname that fit him well, the Empire Builder. Hill made his fortune as the driving force behind the Great Northern Railway, a line he pushed all the way across the northern plains to the Pacific coast. He built without the large government land grants that helped his rivals, which made his achievement all the more admired in his time. From this house on Summit Avenue, he directed a transportation empire that shaped the entire American Northwest. It is fitting that the grandest house on the street belonged to the man who moved the region itself. The railroad was the engine behind so much of what we are riding past today. The Great Northern carried grain, timber, ore, and settlers across thousands of miles of prairie and mountain. Its success turned St. Paul into a great inland hub and filled the pockets of the families who built these houses. When you look at the scale of the Hill House, you are really looking at the scale of the railroad that paid for it. The tracks are miles away now, but their wealth is written into every stone along this avenue. Now the avenue straightens into its long central run, and we settle into an easy rhythm. Block after block of fine houses rolls by, each with its own character, its own turrets and gables and bay windows. The e-bike makes this middle stretch feel effortless, a gentle glide beneath the trees. This is the part of the ride where you stop counting mansions and simply let them wash over you. There is a quiet music to it, the soft whir of the wheels and the shifting shade. One of the joys of Summit Avenue is how many architectural styles stand side by side. Along its length you will find Romanesque, Queen Anne, Italianate, Georgian, Tudor, and more, a dozen fashions of a changing age. Because the houses went up over many decades, each generation left its favorite style behind in stone and brick. The result is a living timeline you can read from a bicycle seat, one house at a time. No two blocks feel quite the same, and that variety is part of why the street has never grown dull. The trees close in overhead again, and for a while the ride feels almost like moving through a green tunnel. Summit Avenue was planted and cared for with the same pride that raised its houses, and generations of gardeners kept the boulevard leafy and cool. On a warm summer day like this one, the shade is a genuine relief, and the light comes down soft and green. The e-bike lets us hold a gentle pace, unhurried, while the leaves whisper above. It is one of the most pleasant miles of cycling anywhere in the city. The trees are not just decoration, they are part of what makes Summit a boulevard rather than a mere street. Wide grassy strips, mature shade trees, and generous setbacks give the whole avenue its park-like feel. For well over a century, the city and its residents have worked together to keep these blocks green and whole. That patient stewardship is a large part of why the streets survived so intact when others fell to the wrecking ball. Riding beneath this canopy, you feel the reward of all those decades of care. As we move west, the houses grow a little newer and a touch less enormous, though no less handsome. This part of the avenue filled in later, as the fashionable district stretched steadily toward the river. The e-bike carries us past comfortable stone and brick homes shaded by old trees. You can feel the neighborhood shift from the showpieces of the barons to the fine homes of a broad and prosperous class. The rhythm of the ride stays the same, calm and rolling. On our right stands a row of brownstone houses known as Summit Terrace, and one door among them is quietly famous. The address is number 599, and it is a National Historic Landmark not for its size, but for who once lived and worked inside. It is a handsome brownstone with a rounded arch over the entrance and a bay window climbing 2 stories at the front. From the street it looks like many other row houses on the avenue, elegant but unassuming. Its fame comes entirely from a young writer who lived on the 3rd floor. That writer was F. Scott Fitzgerald, who came home to St. Paul as a young man with a manuscript that had already been rejected. His family had moved into this house, and in the summer of 1919, he shut himself in a 3rd-floor room overlooking the street and rewrote the book. That book became This Side of Paradise, his very first novel, and it made him famous almost overnight. Fitzgerald grew up in this neighborhood, and though the avenue could be grand and cold, it clearly left its mark on his imagination. We are riding past the exact window where an American classic was finished. Fitzgerald knew this street intimately, and he wrote about it with a mix of longing and unease. He called Summit Avenue a museum of American architectural failures, half in love and half in critique, the way a young man is with the place that made him. Riding past his old block, it is easy to picture him walking these sidewalks, restless and ambitious. The e-bike carries us along the same route he must have wandered 1,000 times. Every great street collects its writers, and this one collected a giant. A little further along, we pass the official residence of the governor of Minnesota at 1006 Summit Avenue. It is a handsome English Tudor house of 20 rooms, built in 1910 for a St. Paul lumber businessman named Horace Irving. His family lived here for more than 50 years before his daughters gave the house to the state. Since 1965, it has served as the ceremonial home of Minnesota's governors. Of all the mansions on the avenue, this is the one that still belongs to the people of the state. Beyond the governor's house, the avenue keeps its dignified calm, block after block of well-kept homes. There is something reassuring about a street that has changed so little in 100 years. The e-bike glides along, and the miles slip by almost without notice. You begin to sense that we are drawing closer to the western end, where the land tips down toward the river. But there is one more grand building to see before we get there. On the high ground stands the University Club, a Tudor revival clubhouse that has held one of the best views in the city since 1913. It was modeled after the old Oxford and Cambridge Club in London, all dark timber and gracious rooms. Its architects were the same firm that designed New York's Grand Central Station and the St. Paul Hotel. Young Fitzgerald attended many events inside these walls, though he was never actually a member. For more than a century, it has been a gathering place for the life of the avenue. Now the avenue begins its long, gentle descent toward the Mississippi. The house is thin a little and the trees grow tall and old, and the ride takes on a downhill ease. This western reach was the last to be built, the frontier of the fashionable district as it pushed toward the water. On the e-bike, the descent is pure pleasure, the wheels humming as the river valley draws nearer. The end of the street is now within reach. It is worth remembering that this whole avenue is protected, not by accident but by decades of deliberate care. Summit Avenue lies within 2 National Historic Districts and 2 City Heritage Preservation Districts, layers of protection that guard its houses and its trees. That is why a rider today sees very nearly what a rider a century ago would have seen. Preservation here has meant refusing to tear down, refusing to widen, and refusing to let the street become ordinary. The result is the intact avenue we have been riding all afternoon. The trees begin to open now, and you can feel the land falling away ahead of us toward the river gorge. The air changes near the water, cooler and a little wider, and the sky grows larger over the handlebars. We have crossed the entire ridge, from the cathedral at one end to the bluff above the Mississippi at the other. The e-bike coasts the last gentle grade as the great river comes into view. This is where Summit Avenue finally runs out of high ground. At its western end, Summit Avenue reaches the Mississippi River, at the very edge where St. Paul meets Minneapolis. Here, the long straight boulevard finally gives way to the bluff and the broad river valley below. It is a fitting close for a street that began on a high ridge and rode that ridge for 4.5 miles. From the overlook, you can see the water moving south, the same river that carried the commerce that built these very mansions. The avenue and the river have been companions the whole way, one above the other. We ease off the pedals and let the e-bike roll to a stop at the end of the line. Behind us lies the whole grand parade, the cathedral, the railroad king's palace, the writer's window, the governor's Tudor house, and hundreds of mansions in between. Ahead lies the river and the open valley, the natural boundary that shaped everything we have seen. It has been a quiet, unhurried ride through a street that time somehow spared. Summit Avenue gave us its full length, and it did not disappoint. Summit Avenue endures because generations chose to protect it, and because the e-bike lets us experience its full 4.5 miles the way it was meant to be seen, slowly and completely. From the domed cathedral to the banks of the Mississippi, we rode past the best-preserved Victorian Boulevard in America, and every mansion held a piece of the story. Places like this remind us that history is not only in books, but in the streets we can still ride down today. If you enjoyed this journey, there are many more streets and trails waiting for us to explore together. Thank you for watching. Follow for more of the trails of the world.